Okay, guys, we're back. I've been hydrated, I've been fed, I've danced out my ecstatic energy in the kitchen. That is my dog. That is not just somebody heavily breathing in the background. The joy of virtual events, okay? So introducing our next speaker, I really hope your inspirational notebooks are ready because I know I sure am, okay? We've got Rynne Cullen, the founder of TuneRelease, a media pitching platform that secures coverage for the latest song releases, and Applaud.live, Applaud.live, a bookings platform for the live music industry. Okay, Luke, can you just calm down? Let the rest of us catch up, please, before you out here releasing everything. He's also the marketing and communications lead at Scale Ireland, an independent nonprofit organization that represents, advocates, and supports indigenous tech startups and scale-up companies, and has founded their Slack community. He's the winner of the Blackstone LaunchPad Sprints in 2017, the Trinity Entrepreneurial Society Dragons Den competition in 2018, and has been featured as one of Ireland's 100 hot startups by the Sunday Business Post. I feel like you're the next Dr. Dre here, Luke, when it comes to technology. This is you, okay? He is also an alumnus of the Google Adopt a Startup, Enterprise Ireland's New Frontiers, and Trinity LaunchBox Student Accelerator programs, and is the former president of Trinity Orchestra. If impressive was a person or a meme, like it's right over here. Luke, I'm going to hand it over to you because I clearly cannot talk about what you've done anymore than I already have. So, hi, Luke. Welcome. You're on mute.
Hi everyone, how's it going? So thanks for the lovely introduction there. I really appreciate it. My name is Rynne Cullen. I'm the founder of Applaud, which is a startup aimed at empowering musicians through technology. We have two products on the market to date. The most recent one is TuneRelease, which, as was mentioned, is a media pitching platform aimed at getting artists' latest song releases featured on the latest publications, playlists, blogs, you name it. Then we have Applaud.live, which we invested heavily into pre-COVID, which was a bookings platform dealing with corporate weddings and festival events. We mobile optimized the site, spent nigh on 20K into the development, and then COVID hit, wiping out that potential revenue stream. So that kind of led us into how can we stay lean? How do we use no-code tools as an alternative way of building product? Just because funds are very tight as a startup. I don't come from means. We've no investors at the moment. We're happy bootstrapping, and TuneRelease was that kind of pivot that led us down that route. To bring you back to the classroom, I suppose I wanted to set some learning objectives. What would be the main tools you could use in your teams, in your future endeavors as startup founders or as tech leads and CTOs down the line? The main thing I'd like you to take from this is when to really decide when should I actually build product, or when is there a cheaper, quicker alternative to use to increase the productivity of your team and really get results quicker. And then lastly, I'd like to touch on your role as a tech lead, team communication, and especially with the rise of remote working, how to best kind of foster a really productive environment for your team. So I'll dive into a little bit about my story, how I got started. I kind of fell into entrepreneurship. I really didn't set out to be an entrepreneur. If anything, there's some weird clips of me saying I'd love to be a Taoiseach or something when I was like 6. So I was stumbling through the library in Trinity, and I found a leaflet for the Blackstone LaunchPad Sprints. In the back of my mind, I'd been thinking about Airbnb, its application to the travel and accommodation industry, and how the music industry doesn't really have an equivalent. So the business model made sense. It's the same. It's a commission-based model. You just need a fully functional web application and eventually an app. I wanted to start with the app. I thought that was where things were going back in, I would have been 18, 19 at the time, 6 years ago. Yeah. And quickly I learned that building an app is probably the worst thing you could do as a startup founder. It's very hard to know exactly what product you're going to build. You're going to spend 20 grand on outsourcing if you're non-technical yourself. And you're just not going to get that data or, I suppose, indication from your customers that what you're building is the right thing to build. So we were told, build a web application. And For us, that was a Squarespace website where it was little old me in the background building profiles for musicians. I used to cold pitch them on Facebook whenever I saw a good video from an artist. And that's when I learned a little bit of sales and marketing, and send a lovely templated kind of personalized text and say, hey, would love if you would join this platform. If you could send me on all your details and I'll create a profile for you. So it's very hands-off. It's an easy way to get users, early users onto the platform, but it's not something that scales very quickly. And then I was also managing the orchestra at the time. We were doing the likes of the Dropbox Summer Party, Electric Picnic, All Together Now. The Dublin Bowie Festival was probably our biggest gig that year. These were all difficult gigs to both organize logistically, but also to price. And that's where I thought, that's where tech can come in. That's where it can make life easy for the decision makers. You can see what other people are charging. There's a bit of parity in the market, and there's a bit of standardization in when you should get paid. One experience I had personally was we were doing a wedding as a quartet, and I was waiting for the envelope at the end of the gig, and it was 200 quid short. Hadn't a clue who to approach to get it solved, because I knew if we walked away, we'd probably never speak to the client again and get that shortfall back. So that's where Applaud came from. And we were lucky that we fell into the Blackstone LaunchPad Sprints, learned how to do a pitch, learned a bit about legals and creating a business model and whatnot. I must have interviewed, I'd say, about 50 companies from Ukraine, Poland, India, you name it, to get a feasible kind of quote that I could bring to potential investors. God knows where these investors are going to come from. But they were all coming in at around 15,000 to 20,000 for the web app. So the next step was to find a team. So Tangent and LaunchBox had a load of Find Your Co-Founder events. I found Brian, Connor, and Gordon. We were all in different years in college, which is not ideal for co-founders. Brian and Gordon had to go and get real jobs after they graduated, which was totally fair. And I had another year of college. I also had the task to juggle in Trinity with regards to the live events and the orchestra. And then Connor was the year behind me. So he had another year or 2 years to go, especially if he wants to do a master's, before he could commit full time to a startup. So we did LaunchBox for the summer months. It gave us kind of an internship fee, which was great. The best thing we got was people coming into us, telling us about their founder stories. So I really want this to drive value, and I want you to ask as many questions as you can at the end, because I'm going to touch on a wide range of topics here, and I'm going to fly through them. So in LaunchBox, we built, it was fully functional, but it didn't look very appealing. So I was never really confident about launching it. And then when I graduated, I found out about the New Frontiers program. Actually, no, I wasn't fully graduated. I ended up juggling final year for about 3 months with New Frontiers. And then I had 3 months in the summer of New Frontiers. I don't think they realized I was still in college. So the thing about startups is be scrappy, be cheeky, get as much funding as you can. And you don't really have to disclose everything if you don't need to. New Frontiers was fantastic. It gave us $2.5 grand stipend every month, which was for the founders. I live at home. I don't have very high expenses out in Blanchardstown. So I just reinvested that back into the company as a director's loan in the hopes that I can eventually get that back down the line. So that gave us some working capital to hire proper developers. But again, made the same mistake. Are we building without getting real feedback on what features are desired? And do we have enough runway to build a fully functional product by the end of it? So key things from that whole process is avoid the hype. Don't dive into building. I'd rather you build something that is absolutely manual. There's a great meme. I wish I had it for this presentation, but enterprise software of just, you put in your details. It's the enterprise software startup team that's bringing it to the next thing that's what the product does. That's essentially what we were doing at the start, and we should have continued doing that for a lot longer than we did. To really emphasize this, yesterday, Scale Ireland had a webinar with the Tánaiste Leo Varadkar and two really, really successful founders that I admire, Claire McHugh of Accionista and Bobby Healy of Mana Aero drone delivery. And drones require a hell of a lot of R&D. He spent 10 million in the last number of years building Mana drone delivery, and they're still quite a way away from being profitable. So if you can, and if you're not going deep tech or even manufacturing, try do it as lean as you can, and don't invest too heavily in research and development at the start, because that part comes much quicker and it's much easier to do. once you have that wireframe of doing everything manually, everything written down, all the processes, workflows, logic, it's all there ready for you to build your lovely product at the end of the day with as little tech debt as possible. I did an English degree. I had 6 hours in college a week, which is, I think, why I had so much time to think about these entrepreneurial projects. But I had to learn on the go, and there's a lot of programs out there. There's Startup Boost, Accelerator. There's New Frontiers, LaunchBox, Dragons Den, Blackstone LaunchPad Sprints. There's now going to be the new NDRC project or accelerator run by Dogpatch Labs. So I think look into all these programs, get as much learning out of it as you can, because you're not going to be, I don't think you should as a founder be looking for a quick exit at our age. Now it's doable and it's amazing if you can, but you need to be looking for learnings, because the second, third, fourth time you do it is going to be so much quicker and easier, and you're not going to repeat the same mistakes again. So I want to talk about the art of the pivot. TuneRelease, we set up within 24 hours. We used Webflow. We bought a template for the website, slightly customized it to our brand, and I got a team of 4 to 6 copywriters and marketing people to join me. We all knew it was just trying our best to get some revenue in the door and provide a service that we knew from the hundreds of coffees I've had with musicians pre-COVID that they wanted. Because they all asked me, how are you getting such good PR with Applaud? And we were really lucky. Some of that PR was from the New Frontiers program PR company that was working with them, Beach Up PR. But I don't think there's very many startups that can afford PR, because you're talking about $2 to $5 grand a month. And you're not going to see that return investment ever again. So Webflow is a really juiced up version of Squarespace. You can build your full marketing website on it. You can have all your blog posts, which are great for content marketing. It frees up the developer team to work on the real product, as opposed to having the marketing team say, oh, can you make this tiny update to the font on the website, or can you change this word or that word? That really jars the development process. And if you're trying to juggle so many different tasks, you're not going to get to the real issues that you're trying to solve in the market. There's also an export code option. It's not something I'd recommend though, because again, you still have to export that code to the developer team, and they have to upload it and make sure there's no bugs or issues when they do that. I suppose the key learning there is to host the product on a subdomain. So for us, it's app.tunerelease.com instead of tunerelease.com. The marketing website will remain and stay on tunerelease.com. The next no-code tool I'd like to touch on is Airtable. So Airtable allows you to build a very early stage database. You can automate some of the emails via their SendGrid plugin. You can use dedupe to remove any duplications in your database. There's a lot you can do with it, and there's still a lot of untapped potential. They're still building out plugins and features that will really help early stage startups essentially launch, scale, and then build the real product. Now, an upgrade to that is Bubble.io. Bubble.io is a bootstrapped startup until last year, where they raised a few million to, I suppose, deal with all the tech debt they had from being a bootstrap startup. I did a Udemy course for 12 quid, learned the ins and outs of it. It leaves a lot to be desired in terms of responsive design. You can create APIs and plugins to work with it. There's like SendGrid, there's Sendinblue, I think is the other one for emails. And you can do a lot of Google Analytics. You could use Hotjar, you name it, just to make sure that your user flows are working really well. And there is a staging server and a production server, but again, it's not great, which is why I think there is something to be said about having your own custom built web application. And for us, Applaud was built on Django, PostgreSQL database with a React front end. And that's so fast, it's insane. But the issue is it's not being used. So I'm going to close the talk later with a little project. We're hiring tech interns at the moment. We have a new tech lead, Rynne Cullen. Despite the surname, we're not related, but we have surprisingly a lot in common. And he's working with Ben's Insights at the moment, another Trinity startup that are absolutely killing it at the moment. So he can lead any interns that we have on the team through our tech stack and onboard them. So in terms of Bubble, the next step for us was we managed to build a fully end-to-end solution where artists could upload their song, all the file types, so MP3, WAV, any contextual information. So that'd be the song pitch, and then their press release, which is usually a PDF or a Google Doc link. The next step was to send a lovely personalized email in the format that a media outlet wants to receive it. So we did that with the SendGrid plugin. And the next stage that would make our platform the market leading one in Ireland is the analytics component. And I think analytics are hard to build. You have to, from the onset, I would say, sit down with your team and say, what are our North Star metrics? What do we want to track? So for us, it could be number of submissions, number of artists, number of songs, number of media outlets. There are 4 things that we can actually also repurpose into our investor updates, which lowers the burden on the team in terms of creating content that we have to send to potential investors and doing all our marketing. If you can automate a lot of that, you're doing really, really well. So on Nocode, we're limited by when you click a button, you can +1 to the database and show that number on the artist dashboard. That's probably the limit of what we'd be able to do at this moment in time. I know Bubble and other startups in the no-code space are working incredibly hard to create new features, so it will get there. But I think what we can do with the custom web application is monitor how long has a person listened to the song, which is much more insightful than have they clicked a button and maybe clicked off it straight away. Have they fully downloaded the file? Stuff like that we really need to find out about. And Bubble, by just clicking a button, stuff can go wrong, files cannot get downloaded, and the metrics just aren't there. So we've managed to bootstrap. We've generated revenue to a point where we're now profitable, and now we're in a much safer, better position that when we do approach investors, we can say, look, we're going to be here and grow with or without you. Now, the only worry is if they fund competitors and perhaps blitz scale ahead of you. But we can say, look, we've validated the market, we've de-risked our product an insane amount. We could hand all the workflows from Bubble to an outsourced company, or we could hire 3 to 4 developers to customize and build a web application for us. So we don't have to worry about uptime being on Bubble or being able to deploy the next update, because actually the other day I couldn't update our latest update because Bubble had an issue. So there's a lot to be said, again, about doing everything manually, building as much as you can. And as a founder myself, I have a lot more respect for what developers do. I know how hard it can be, and I know that they need the space to ideate, really think through how they're going to implement different features, what workflows are going to be the best, most effective, fast, and user-friendly. You can't rush things like that. And as a startup, you're always rushing. So I think if you can partner with founders that have some no-code experience, or you can point them in the right direction, it's going to ease your workload a little bit and free you up to work on really important feature development. So in terms of team communication, my stack is probably a fairly common one for startups these days. We use Slack for any midnight ramblings or eureka moments. I find Trello to be the best task management in terms of how visual it is, and everything's lovely and segmented. Use a Kanban methodology in terms of you want an icebox for all your crazy ideas that you will get to, but just not yet. You need to ask yourself, what's the purpose of absolutely everything I'm building? And if you can't find the purpose, don't build it, literally. We've built a 2-sided marketplace without building the media side of the dashboard. Whereas the younger me 2-3 years ago would have said, oh no, we need both sides of the marketplace built. But that's 2 behemoth tasks to get perfect, and you're not going to get it perfect first time around. Like to talk about a little pivot we did recently, or iteration, I should say, rather than pivot, was we were using uploaded files. We found them too slow. We found that when they clicked onto the AWS file in the cloud, the download option wasn't available on some browsers. So we had to pivot back, iterate back to using shareable links. But then artists don't know sometimes how to use the shareable links on Google Drive or Dropbox. Sometimes they're set to private. There was a whole can of worms to deal with there. So we iterated back again to files. And then we found a way to direct them via a unique ID in the URL to get the user onto a song page where they could click and download the files from our website, track the analytics, instead of getting them to go to an AWS file that's stored, that Bubble stores, because we have no control over that. The next thing is to use the likes of Notion for your company Wikipedia. So any of your Slack ramblings that actually are quite important, I want you to kind of think about, if there's a new me joining the team, how do I train them up efficiently? And Notion's great for that. So have team sections for each different role, marketing, dev, you name it. Tag people accordingly in that, and make sure you're essentially building a how-to of everything. I supplement this with Loom videos. So again, there's all these no-code tools that are really helpful to accelerate your team building process, your onboarding, your marketing, and your development at the end of the day. And then a founder relationship is something that's tricky to maintain. It is a marriage. So the best thing to do is be upfront about everything. And sometimes, I know it's a bit onerous sometimes, but use Toggle or Hubstaff to track your time. And that way you can export the report and say, look, I have spent 8 hours on this. This is what's holding me back. This is what's taking me so long. With a remote setup, you almost have to over communicate. And don't be afraid to hop on a call. A call is so much better than just texting all the time. And then do a Loom recording of the issue and troubleshoot it together. Like Ronan's the tech guy on the team now, but even just bouncing ideas off him on a Google Meet, I'm able to find the solution myself sometimes and be like, okay, brilliant, that actually worked. I wouldn't have got there if I hadn't been able to bounce the ideas off someone, you know? So really focus on, if you're the tech person in the company, when to actually build product and write a line of code, or when to bash out a no-code solution in a couple of hours that does the exact same thing and is probably more affordable because your time is valuable. And you could be working on partnership APIs with other companies. Like we'd love to work with Warm Music for a bit of airplay monitoring. We'd love to use Rotor Videos for video creation. There's so much you can be doing as the tech person that actually isn't to do with writing code. For the most part, you're going to be directing the product, making that roadmap. And I think living by the 80-20 rule. 80% of what you build and 80% of what you, or 20% of what you build and do is going to be 80% of the output and what works. So you are probably wasting 80% of your time on the little tiny things that really don't impact on the user experience or deliver on the value proposition that you're bringing to the market. So I've touched on the North Star metrics. I've probably flown through this, and I hope I haven't overloaded any of you. But since I have time, I'm going to chat a little bit about Scale Ireland and how we actually use no code. And this is in a non-profit policy organization. It's not something that needs a product per se, but we have this Slack community, and I'd love you all to join it. So we'll be launching our website this week, so keep an eye out, and you can go onto the Slack page and join the forum there. Essentially, 500 nearly founders there that are bouncing ideas off each other, are looking for help, are looking for interns, are looking for actual full-time employees as well. So it's a great place to collaborate and learn a lot from. But we use Webflow again for our marketing website. We're moving away from Squarespace because I couldn't deal with how uncustomizable half of it was. And we're now embedding reports through an Airtable database. So you can now browse our entire directory of reports through a lovely little embed. And the same goes if you go on TuneRelease and go onto the releases section. It's just an Airtable embed with all the downloadable files that's extremely easy to use for media outlets. So they can go on this and just see this open source directory of the latest music releases. So there's a lot of applications to no code. There's a lot to be said about reducing your costs, increasing your speed at developing products. And then just to close, I'd like to mention again that we are hiring part-time interns at the moment, specifically technical ones, because we have a big project ahead of us, which is converting our lovely Applaud application to equip it with the TuneRelease features that we have entire workflows and logic for, and would like to incorporate into our product. So if you need to catch me at all or shoot me any questions as well, if we don't have time here, definitely hit me up on social media, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn. It's just Rynne Cullen. So thank you to Adam, Chloe, and all the team at System. I really appreciate the opportunity and look forward to answering any questions.
Wow. I'm not only impressed by your accolades and what you've done, but even just that presentation itself, it's amazing. I'm just gonna have a little look there on the stage to see if there's any questions coming in. I have this feeling, Luke, that you're after maybe just stunning everybody into silence because you gave away so many golden nuggets. Yeah. I literally was just like, yes, Luke, coming through with all these golden nuggets. I'm so serious about you being the Dr. Dre when it comes to tech and things like that, because today you have enriched the Diamond panel today, just in regards of you know, the value of knowledge that you spoke about, the word
Yeah.
that came to mind to me. I just like to summarize sometimes because I'm always about description. Okay.
Yeah.
I heard empowerment, ambitious, passionate, and I can certainly see why you have all these accolades behind you. You know, which is a really, really good thing. Just for the attendees, a few things that I really like to just go back and avoid the hype. I really like that. I'm always talking about authenticity and, you know, avoiding the hype. And it's such a serious thing, especially when you're trying to build something from the ground up, which I think is so important because you're thinking about target audience, who you're actually going to be selling to. This is so good. And then even when you talked about don't dive into building, do it as lean as you can. Don't invest too heavily into research and development because there's so much that you can learn and you can go on there. I think it's very impressive, and you honestly have enriched the guest speakers that we have today. So I'm just having a little look there. So Oisín's just saying, very cool talk. Never really considered the value of using no-code solutions like that before.
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind if you could just elaborate on that a little bit more, kind of maybe even talk to us about how you came about that, or lessons-wise, or any advice you might have for somebody who's maybe trying to be the next Dr. Dre like you, Luke, and some practical advice that you could give them.
Yeah, so I kind of labeled myself very, very early on that I was an arts degree student and couldn't build product. So that really stops you in your tracks, and it makes you go, all right, I need to rely on all these other people that aren't probably as passionate about the project yet because it's not tested, it's not proven, and you don't even know your mission statement yet because it's so early. So what you really need to do is start Googling. Udemy, Skillshare, they're all there. Now, a lot of them are money spinners, but some of the courses are really, really valuable. So we stumbled upon no-code solutions, the likes of Bubble, Adalo, Integromat, Zapier, just through Googling, literally word for word what our problems were at the time. We then stumbled upon no-code Slack groups. Like there's a no-code founders Slack group, which is run by a guy called JT, and it's insane. It has a channel per product. So it has a Bubble section, a SendGrid section, Integromat, you name it. And you can just troubleshoot all your product issues with these no-code tools very quickly with other founders. Out of curiosity, what sites and where does one learn to source web apps from? How do you find a team to build your app? So the thing is, if you want a credible team, especially if you're going the VC route and you're looking to build real deep tech products, you need to be working with people that you've worked with before. It's very hard, obviously, if you're young to do that unless you've worked on college projects together. So the best thing to do is to join the likes of Dogpatch Labs First Fridays, join the Scale Ireland Slack group, get chatting to all these people, because we have a networking channel in the Slack group where on a weekly basis you're matched with one random person, and it just have a chat, bash out your problems together and see if you have a lot in common. And sometimes you do. Also, I wonder, could you approach professors in the universities and say, is there anyone, say, doing a thesis on this topic? A good example of that would have been Eric Risser with Arithmetics. His PhD turned into a startup and he exited there for, I don't know, was it 60 million more or something. So you can apply your research and your hard work to startups and you can commercialize it. I've seen job postings as well for founders, they're especially when someone has a PhD on a really good topical thing like AI, machine learning, 3D printing, anything like that. They're always looking for someone to commercialize it, or the next CEO just to take over that side of the business for the CTO, essentially, who is currently acting as CEO. And don't be afraid to take a step back if it's not your strong point. Like for me, I am so thankful I got a new accountant. Like there's so many issues with VAT returns. Okay, when you're founding a company, don't register for VAT until you hit 37.5 grand. Please don't. Otherwise, you have to do a VAT return every 2 months. And can you imagine the stress of that if you're not financially literate? So don't do that. Oisín, very good talk. Never considered the value of no-code solutions. I definitely think Ireland is way behind. No, it's not way behind. It's getting there. The startup ecosystem is nearly thriving, but we're way behind in terms of news filtering down to us from all these US startups. So like Bubble is a French company. So thankfully I found them on Google, but they wouldn't have any presence really per se in Ireland. Notion have recently joined our Slack group and started engaging. So it's great to see that the US startups are seeing Ireland as this I suppose, vibrant startup ecosystem of potential customers, because a lot of these are B2B enterprise products. But I do think we're behind. So I know there's some startup founders, I haven't met him personally, but Shane Curran took the leap of faith and went over to Silicon Valley to raise his round. You can do that. You're going to be surrounded by the best of the best, because there's just this brain drain. But I think the brain drain is now being reversed, and a lot of startup founders from Silicon Valley are spreading across the States, but some of them are coming to Ireland, and some of them are even going to the likes of Valencia in Spain. So now is your opportunity to meet with all these people. Best examples for my own thing would be, there's a startup in Ireland, I think it's Soundwave, that was acquired by Spotify. We just pitched on LinkedIn the previous co-founders, because they were acquired by Spotify. We wanted to know what was their journey like, because it's such a journey filled with potholes. So they happily hopped on a quick little Google Meet. If a meeting runs over, it's going very well. Well, they might have other meetings as well, but that's when you can bash out ideas with someone who's been through it, has done it for the last 10 years, and can give you a real kind of professional top-down view of it. Have I ever encountered many limits when building Nocode? Yes. The analytics component was huge. The personalization component was huge. I feel like you get a lot more extensibility when building something yourself. I agree, but there is that big cost. Yes. So like we invested 20 grand, and I'm a student at the time. I don't have 20 grand. We got the Microfinance Ireland loan. We had to pay that back. We're still paying that back. So there's a lot of pitfalls in terms of early stage optimism. I'd like founders to be short-term pessimists, long-term optimists. It's probably the best way of putting it. But the limits have been really to do with responsive design in terms of Bubble. It's appalling. You'll have buttons that elongate across a 32-inch screen to beat the band. You have to do fixed limits and everything on that. And then the analytics component, clicking a button is not a real analytic. You want to make sure that the thing has been properly downloaded, that you're getting the amount of time that they've spent on completing a task. And in terms of even user database, like I'm trying to build an admin component, and it's such a hack together solution of this button is now verifying this song in that group. But actually it doesn't really work sometimes, especially if you update the application with a new feature. A lot of things break. So I don't have that professional experience or that training that a 4-year bachelor's degree would hopefully give you if you did computer science and business, or a similar degree. That's why I think it's good to get a mentor on board as early as you can to say, let's iron out the development process. One of our best mentors was Patrick Monaghan. He was the former CTO of Salon Software, and he's currently with the therapy clinic. Amazing guy. And the great thing is the local enterprise office will reimburse you for your expenditure on these consultants. Now, the issue being it's usually 50-50 reimbursement, so you only get half the amount you spend back. So make sure you're investing in the right people. Don't give away sweat equity too early. We had mentors that asked for 8% sweat equity for one meeting a month over 12 months. Run for the hills. If you end up actually getting an early stage investor on board, they're going to look at that cap table and be like, why does this person who invested zero money into the company have this chunk of the business? And there's the whole legal component of paying 5-10 grand on legals to get everything done above board and make sure you're not being screwed, to put it lightly. What kind of skills or expertise should a new startup team have? Should there be a technical person, a copywriter? Startup employees, founders, they need to be jack of all trades. It's much later in a business's journey that you need to hire experts in specific areas. I think there's a great podcast run by Kieran, the VP of marketing at HubSpot, called the TLDR podcast. And he touches on this across a number of different interviews, where when you're early, you just need someone who could experiment with multiple different mediums. So for us, I've been doing Facebook ads, Google ads. If you want to call me the marketer of the team, I've been doing sales calls cold for Instagram and LinkedIn for touching base with artists and potential partners. And then I've done copywriting for the blog posts and content marketing. And to be honest, the best trick of the book is to set up a Google Digest, or Alerts is the tool, and get it to send you a digest of all your keywords from your competitors. And that's another no-code, great thing, brilliant. And then Buffer for scheduling out your social media posts. Do that on a Sunday. But get an alert set up that tells you everything that's going on in your industry, and copy and paste the press releases into your content, because you're using Google Alerts. Not many people are, and you're probably going to be the first person to post about it in your geography. So for us, Ireland in general, we're usually very quick off the ball with new grants that have been launched by the Arts Council, or RTE2FM is running a Spot the Artist kind of campaign. If we post about that, we get 4,000 hits from artists. They're all being tracked by our cookies. I don't know if Apple's update will change that, but then we retarget them and our cost of acquisition is pittance. Dublin, the best place for building a tech startup when it comes to Ireland. Dublin is really coming on leaps and bounds. Like, the dog patch setup over in the CHQ is absolutely insane. They have a full conference center. They're opening up the other half of the ecosystem. And then they're partnered with all the regional hubs down in Kerry, Cork, even Northern Ireland with Ormeau Bats. And then there's all these pre-accelerators that are starting to become really professionally run. So in terms of building a startup, getting the right mentorship, there's loads of people doing it for free. You have Gene Murphy in Startup Boost, who's partnered with Techstars. You have Eamon Carey, who's the managing director over in London, and he's with Techstars as well. But he loves Irish startups, and he has so much time for early stage founders. You have the likes of Chris McClelland in Ignite Northern Ireland. They have a lovely pre-accelerator program, but it's actually an accelerator, and it's a convertible loan note. So instead of setting a valuation so early on when you don't know how much your company is going to be valued, you're able to get some working capital into the company really early, and you can worry about the valuations down the line when you do a proper professional investor financing round. And then again, in terms of talent, you are surrounded by the big ones. There's Facebook, Google. A lot of it's international talent, which is great to see. And they seem to be really receptive in terms of mentorship. Like Dogpatch on Fridays have a lot of Google staff there ready to lend their experiences. And I find a lot of Google staff are former founders. So I could never say starting your company is a bad investment if you keep learning and you don't let it affect your mental health and your lifestyle too much. Because again, 20% of what you do will be 80% of the results. But I think I've done it so many times. You lose control of diet. You're working till midnight. You're double jobbing. So I'm working with Scale at the moment, and that's allowing us to bootstrap, but it's not very healthy. Market sizing, brilliant. So the good thing to do is read industry reports. You could look up KPMG, Deloitte. But what we did was Daniel Ek, the founder of Spotify, said that there's 40,000 releases submitted to Spotify every day. That's 14.5 million releases a year, and that's just primarily original music. And they're still not launched in every region in the world. So for us, we just times 14.5 million by our average contract value, which at the time was 400, and we got our TAM, our total addressable market, which was nigh on 6 billion. But then if you want to really excite investors and say, look, I can pivot and iterate into different adjacent markets, you could say, well, what's the value of the PR market in general, which is 60 billion plus, I think, growing at around 10% a year, compound annual growth rate. So the best thing you can do is have a little footnote in your pitch deck as to where you got your figures, or even, do you know what's brilliant, and investors absolutely love it, would be a Google Sheets or Microsoft Excel doc of how you came to your conclusions, because they can get their analysts to go through that, tweak the figures to perhaps more realistic ones, because you're going to be optimistic as a founder. And then they'll be able to make their own decision on whether or not the market is, what's your serviceable market, which is what you can do short term. So for us, that'd be kind of Ireland. And that's harder to do because there's not as many data gathering organizations in Ireland, especially in the music space. Like for Applaud, the only reference point we had really was weddings. The census said there's 20,000 weddings in Ireland, 10x that in the UK, 10x the UK's to the US, and you've got a rough market size. But aside from that, bookings were for the most part cash in hand, extraordinarily hard to estimate. So try and do a bottoms up approach. How many are you doing a week? How many do you think you can do a month? And then also reverse engineer the top figures that you can get in the headline reports, if you can find any. You can also commission reports from students. We've done a couple of marketing thesis kind of projects with master students in the likes of TU Dublin. UCD, I think, do that as well. And Trinity have a new internship program as well. So there's ways of getting people to do it, but I wouldn't spend like 10 to 20 grand just getting research done. A great person to kind of keep track of is Devin Hughes. He was doing shopping on a daily basis for his customers. And he was able to survey them in the likes of the shopping centers, which is a good place to start if your target market is grocery shoppers. So go out there, do your surveys, get a couple of hundred leads. And sorry, I mean, there are people giving their responses, but get them to opt in as a potential lead. Would you be interested in grocery delivery? If so, they're on your mailing list. They're your first, your early signups, your beta users for your launch. So there's a lot there. Was it challenging putting together a business plan? Yeah, you could spend an awful lot of time doing business plans. Like I won't say too much negative about it, but there's a lot of red tape with a lot of the state-run programs like New Frontiers and the Competitive Star Fund. They really want you to do out the business plans, get to the nitty-gritty stuff. But if you could use like objectives, key results that Google love, you have a real overview of where you want to be, what products you want launched, and what the measurable outcomes are meant to be, without writing a 20, 30-page business plan. I think for the most part, investors much prefer Google Slides, or Canva is pretty good for doing pitch decks. And then ideally have an appendix, and you could perhaps do an executive summary, a one-page summary of your company. Who's the founders? What's the cap table like? What's your product, market, solution? And then any weaknesses, strengths. They do appreciate honesty. You have to remember they're dealing with founders on a daily basis, so you're not going to pull the wool over their eyes very easily. And those that do seem to get caught out fairly quickly later down the line. So be as transparent as you can, but like I know I'm being too transparent at the moment, but I don't mind. Competitors can watch your previous webinars and read your blog posts, but to be honest, if you're looking at the competition, you're going to be 10 steps behind anyway. And again, just to revert back to the talk title, no code tools means I'm very quick at keeping a couple of steps ahead, instead of devoting 3-month sprints to building out products. And then I suppose, Thomas, I didn't fully answer your question in terms of what should a team have. You can outsource accountancy for $200 a month. Anything above that's obscene. $200 a month is still a lot for a student, but you're crazy not to do it if you're generating any significant revenue, and especially if you're VAT registered. Just the fallout that could happen if you don't have your accounts in order is insane. I've heard some horror stories on podcasts. Legals are tricky, especially if you've co-founder agreements, whatnot. But you don't need a legals person. You don't really need a finance person. You just need someone who can do the day-to-day calculations when needs be, and can do the market sizing and whatnot, and knows what size profit margin they need so that they can pay payroll at the end of the day. An accountant will help you with the rest. In terms of tech, like I think we're going to see the rise of no-code techies joining even companies, big companies, because there's entrepreneurship, which is the new craze for like the likes of big companies like Bank of Ireland and stuff, where they want to almost spin out new companies from within. And no-code people being deployed into companies like that enables them to start iterating really quickly and get some market research done on clients, and segment the results, do a bit of A/B testing very, very quickly. And then, so no code, the no code person can also be the marketing person if they've the gift of the gab and a bit of copywriting skills. But yeah, like again, I'm a solo founder. I do love having someone to bounce ideas off. So if you are going the solo route, find other founders that are solo founders, get chatting to them, break down your ideas together, troubleshoot things, do introductions to each other. The one thing I'll say about the startup ecosystem, especially in Dublin, is for the most part, everyone is very, very nice. It's the inexperienced people or the service providers that sometimes come in and expect the sweat equity or the dividends. Do not give dividends as a startup. That's insane, unless you're raking it in. So you need to be very wary of bringing in people with a really old kind of fashioned view of what a startup is. Like I think the average lifespan of a startup is 7-ish years to exit. If you've done startups before, you have credibility. If you've exited companies before, you have credibility. You can raise money. But if you are like me, have never done it before, learning on the fly, do it yourself. Don't waste 6 months of your life pandering to VCs that think you're too inexperienced. You've no qualified team essentially in it. You have no founders that have exited businesses before. Instead, build a profitable business, make them come to your door, and you're in a much better, stronger position if you want growth capital, because that's the way I'd like VC to be seen. It's growth capital for the most part for most startups. There is an element where deep tech startups and manufacturing startups that are really pushing the boundaries need capital. That's separate. I'd almost put them in a separate category called innovation-driven enterprise, which I think is the MIT term for it. If you do things over, would you have changed anything? I never look backwards and say, oh, that's terrible. But I like making the mistakes, but I'd rather the mistakes didn't take so long. So building product can take 6 months to 12 months. It'd be much quicker to say in the first couple of weeks, this isn't working or it's too expensive. And I wouldn't have done it. I would have built the product myself from the get-go. But you live and you learn, and you're in a better place for it. And everyone's in their own journey. So don't either get disheartened by how well someone's doing. You could fly past them in your 30s, 40s. Like, there's no point putting age limits on anything. Time-wise,
sorry. That was the perfect way to end on that, just in regards of focusing on yourself and not other people and how they're progressing. Luke, you have been dynamite, is the only word I can think of it really to explain your participation today. So thank you so much for participating. I'm sure everybody's going to be excited to try and kind of catch up with you during networking on your social media. So thank you so much for speaking to us today. And thank you for teaching me some things as well, because I'm not here being like, I'm about to be an entrepreneur. So thank you, Luke.
No worries. You can get about 50 grand funding without giving any equity away. So go for it.
Definitely. Thanks for that, Luke.
Thanks very much.
See you.